morning.
report. And hi, Nick, how you doing? We were just talking Morgan Stanley and some of these financials here, and we were just talking about Morgan Stanley yesterday. Was trading up over $1 on a pretty decent earnings report, but quickly gave it all back. What are your thoughts when you're trading a stock and it comes out with good numbers, gaps up, but then gives it all back during the trading session? How do you digest that when that happens?
It could be interpreted in many different ways. If you remember, Disney did that not too long ago, and then
Yeah.
it went back and took out the highs fiercely. So, it's not that concerning. It could be just profit taking. There's a lot of ways to profit on the price action for the day. But if the fundamentals are correct and they're still viable, then it could be an entry point for somebody who's bullish of stock.
Nick, I want to get your overall market thoughts here. Been gone last week. Didn't get to speak to you. We've had the big rally back coming up to new all-time highs here. We actually double ticked it yesterday, 21.26 and a quarter. We hit that back in May. We hit it yesterday, 21.25 pre-market high. Are you? Let me take a guess here. You're looking at selling the market, selling some calls, but you're not going close. You're going far out. Just basis the S&P cash here. We're trading,
Yeah.
21.20. You're going out. You're saying things haven't changed much. It's still a bullish scenario, but all in all, we're still at the upper end of our trading range.
You mean to tell me I could have slept in? Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, I'm not shorting the short term just because for the last few weeks, my focus point, I usually have a bunch of focus points, and at the top are Apple and the small caps. Today, it's more important that it's Apple and the small caps because if what happened to Google happens to Apple, uh, Apple is a big box in the heat map, and it will move the markets. The direction is unknown, but it seems to be that the markets want to go up, up and away, and red is illegal almost, except for IBM last night. So if IBM had gone up today, I tell you it's a sure thing that Apple's move will be up. But now there's a little bit of shadow that, hey, maybe they don't all go up on earnings. But if Apple has a fantastic day like Google, it will move the Nasdaq all by itself. I mean, mathematically, I'm doing air math, as you call it. Is it 2 points? If Apple moves up 15%, I bet you the Qs will be up
Mm-hmm.
more than 2 points all by themselves. So it's it's a beast to reckon with. And the other side of things are the small caps, which are not directly influenced by Apple, although sympathy moves will move up. And they've been shy in the last few days to follow to new highs.
Hmm.
So if you look at the breadth, the highs are happening on mega moves in a few green boxes.
Hmm.
And I wish I had remembered to bring in the heat maps from the last few days. You look at the heat map, and there's a whole bunch of red and scattered green, very little scattered green, and then giant green boxes. So not sure I want to chase the indices up, but if I want to buy the specific up moves in those mega moves like Google on fundamentals or Netflix on fundamentals or Apple on fundamentals, that's fine. But I think somebody who's chasing the index on the backs of these mega moves in the few boxes is probably making a mistake.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the Apple run here. Boy, oh boy, I mean, someone streets leaning towards a really good number today. Last week broke down through some big averages, or actually 2 weeks ago here. Now popping back up at all-time highs here. Did you kind of get into the to the pre earnings run here? Are you sitting tight? What would be your strategy for Apple today?
The Apple strategy for me is very easy. I usually get in on the earnings a month ahead or so. So I've already cashed out of all of my lotto tickets, and they've all more than doubled. So small positions for 10 cents, 15 cents, even 5 and 10 and 9 cents sometimes. Small spreads around the 132, 133, and then they double. I sell them out. And remember the 119 poke the other day that was coinciding with the China debacle? And my thesis there was that there are some big margin calls to be covered somewhere in the world, and somebody went to the piggy bank and they sold what they have, and it was Apple. And I sold credit put spreads in Apple that financed all of those. So Apple long lotto for me is absolutely free for now. So I cashed out a whole bunch, and now I'm sitting on a lot of upside capture if it happens for free. So this is like the best lotto ticket I've ever had, almost. And the from here on out, I have very small money invested, and if Apple has a good breakout, I stand to profit nicely.
Uh,
When I don't stand to lose much.
That's the way to play it. Nick, you mentioned something before. You said a heat map, and Dennis and I know what you're talking about. Could you just go into that a little bit more detail? What platform you use for that, how you use it, and kind of give our listeners a little bit of a lesson here. And just looking at the markets, I mean, you can look at them as a whole, but it's interesting when you break down the individual sectors.
Sure. Heat map, I'll pop in an example as we're talking about right now, I think from a couple of days ago, and you will see that it is, I use the Thinkorswim platform. It has a decent one, and it just gives you a gauge of what's moving where in what indices. And you can have your own heat map, or you can also go with the indices. And this just kind of like zooming out and seeing what's moving and where, so you're not chasing the index. So if the Dow is red and you go and you see one giant big red for IBM, then you know that it's not a Dow issue. It's just a specific drag down from one company in the index. So it's not a decision maker, but it's kind of like a zoom out and let's see what's working, what's not. So if somebody tells me, okay, what's happening today? I go to the heat map and I look and I see a sector that's red. And let's say the NASDAQ is moving. I jump in and I notice that all the biotech and pharma, which by the way, collectively are as big as Apple in the NASDAQ, at least, not scientifically, but just at first glance. And if they're up 2, 3, 4, 10% as they have been, then I know that the strength is coming from the biotech healthcare, and I know not to chase the NASDAQ, but to see if I wanted to chase them. So it's just that one other slice.
For those of you following us in the chat, Nick has uploaded his heat map there to the chat, so you can click that and check out that TD Ameritrade heat map there, which is a nice visual on the markets. Nick, what are your thoughts here on the Microsoft report? We're going to get that tonight here. Stock has been kind of running up here for 3, 4, or 5, actually for about 2 weeks here, ever since the Greece debacle was kicked down the road. We got Microsoft trading down just a nickel here in the pre-market, probably a little bit maybe on IBM weighing on it, but 46.88 is where we're trading here right now. What are your thoughts on Microsoft going into tonight's report?
Well, my theory on earnings is always the same. The move on the report itself, the short-term move, is completely arbitrary, and nobody can foresee that. I've said that many times. It's basically a coin flip how the market is going to react regardless of the numbers. And Microsoft has had 3 candles into breakout territory from a descending channel that's about a month old, maybe 2. So if it wants to continue that trend, it still has room to go, and it may revisit the recent highs, so high 48, 48.50. But again, it's what the market wants to do with the report, whatever they're going to deliver. I'm a fan of their products. I'm not an Apple head, and sacrilege, I know, but it's what's the story they're going to share that's going to excite people. I think you mentioned IBM earlier today, and you started talking about why it's doing this or that as far as price is concerned. I think people would buy IBM if there was a story to tell, if there was a message. But I don't know what they do anymore, IBM. And with Microsoft, they need to give us some guidance to get people excited. I mean, people will buy a story. Look at GoPro. Hey, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. Look at Tesla. It's going to do this. People will buy a story. But you have to offer them something to buy and not vague generalities like IBM has been doing. For Microsoft, it's almost the same thing. It's not only the numbers, but what kind of story they're going to tell.
Couple things here on Microsoft before we go to GoPro here. Topsy-turvy the last couple quarters. Going back 2 quarters ago, they had the miss. They pounded it. It went down to the $41 level, kind of worked its way back, and then off the last report, they gapped it up, went back, came all the way back. I caught the short on when they gapped it up there. Boy, I wish I would have
Yeah.
held down. Then it was just a perfect technical trade. You came back down, filled the gap, and now you got a nice thing. So two inconsistent quarters here. One bad,
Yeah.
one good. So I'm kind of leaning
You,
towards the bad on this one.
well, you could do that, which would prove my 50-50, coin
Yep.
flip earnings reaction. But I think that it's like one way swing is too far, and the other way swing, it kind of erases it. If you do just like a 2-year-old linear regression, it should have some room to go, say, to 49. But that doesn't mean it's going there. But it looks like it wants to spend more time around 45, 46. So I'm not sure it's going to pull a Google and run away from here. So for me, I wouldn't want to touch it just because I don't know what to do with it at this point for the earnings. It's kind of a coin flip and just pick some cheap calls or puts, whichever way your coin falls. But I'm not sure there's anything cheap these days given what people have seen, the moves. I mean, you can see everybody's making $1 zillion on the move in Google, so everybody wants to make $1 zillion on the move in Microsoft and Apple, but that brings up the options prices, and it makes it hard to participate unless you've jumped in early like I did with Apple.
What are you seeing in the option pricing this quarter? Are you seeing like higher expectations? Like now after the whole Google 90-point drop, are you seeing, or not 90-point pop, are you seeing premiums start to get jacked here in the options from that Google earnings report?
I think they are. It's an impression. I can't mathematically prove it, but it gets harder and harder to find a good deal unless you expect a 15% jump. I mean, everybody says, oh my gosh, 15% in Apple. That can't happen. Well, it happened in a much more expensive stock as far as dollar amount. Google jumped 15, 16%, Netflix 18%. So why couldn't it happen in Apple, for example? But for Apple, if it gets hammered, I'd love that. I mean, not that I want people to lose money, but it prints money, and for it to go down to 119 on no news that other day, it was a buying opportunity that people that wanted to go long Apple into the earnings should have jumped on. And instinctively, I threw out some long positions, and I said, what do I have to lose? If I can't risk money in Apple, where can I risk it? Theoretically, it has a beautiful story to tell. It has fan base, like you wouldn't believe. They sell out every widget. Everybody's concentrated on the watch. I don't care about this particular run of the watch. I want to know if they're committed to continuing the watch forward. We're jumping into Apple again. And if they are, then it just lends validity to the whole industry. And I think there can be good things. I think wearables is where it's going to go. And I think we have the formula backwards. Right now, you carry the phone and the watch is the tether. It should be the other way around. I want to wear the watch all the time to be the phone. And if I ever need more real estate space, then I'll pull out that little phablet that's a tether. So that's the way it should be, because it's more convenient to have a watch on than to have a phone in my pocket. But if I want to browse the web or read a big email or something, then I'll pull out the phablet tether, which is a phone that is not the actual signal carrier, but the watch is, or a wearable of sorts. So,
Nick,
I think it's an exciting story.
And you talked about buying a story before, and are you buying this GoPro story here now? We see GoPro here the last 2 days really running up ahead of the report here. I mean, this is just your classic run up ahead of the earnings report. We're going to get them tonight. And GoPro's popped basically 6 points here in the last 2 trading sessions. What are your thoughts here, and are you playing this from the options perspective?
I am not, but my members have been, and I got a couple of messages of thank yous the other day because I said 55 is an important area technically-ish for GoPro. And I don't like to chase stories, right? And when it went up to 90 the first time around, everybody was buying this story of it being the YouTube killer or competitive to YouTube by being its own channel, media, blah, blah, blah. But there was no hint of it. I mean, there was just talk, and people bought it all the way up. And now recently they had a new hire that actually is that story. So now the move becomes fundamentally based because it's no longer vaporware. They've actually brought somebody on board in order to probably go down that direction. So if you want to pursue it now technically and fundamentally, then it makes sense from both and it has the potential to move to the high 70s and 80 and maybe reclaim the high. And this would be technical and fundamental. So I would not call somebody crazy for buying the story this time around. So if you want to invest in a cheap call-based, I wouldn't mind it. I don't know how cheap they are. I haven't looked at the prices, but if somebody wants to bet up on something like that, and I emphasize the word bet because that's what you do with earnings, it wouldn't be too crazy.
We've been on the line with Nic Chahine. He's an option expert. You can also find his commentary on Marketfy, Create Income with Option Spreads. Nic, great input as usual. Glad to have you on today, and we'll talk to you again next Tuesday.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.